So, hello all, good morning and good evening. Today we have Dennis Augustine with us. He will be presenting on a topic, Composability, a strategist guide, what, why, and how. So, let's start the session. Dennis, over to you.
All right. So thank you so much, Kushbu, and everybody who's come, and those who will be watching in replay. I'm Dennis Augustine. I've been in this Sitecore game for the last, I think, 14 years now, doing different sorts of IT solution delivery for the last 23. I am a 6-time Sitecore MVP we've got Michael West joining us. That's just not cool. I'm a 6-time Sitecore MVP in technology, ambassador, and strategy, and lead up the North America strategy lunch as well. Okay, so that is me in a nutshell. I'm also a partner over at Conabo. So many years ago, I'll give you actually just a little bit of more about myself. It might set the context well for the rest of the conversation. I started out in this game doing software development. So I previously was a minister. Some people might know that about me in my past life. And when I left the ministry, I wouldn't even consider myself religious anymore, but when I left the ministry, the only other thing I knew how to do a little bit of was some HTML, some software development. I bootstrapped that into a career in technology. So I served most of my time as a software developer and BA, and then sort of a lead in that area. I got into the Sitecore space, as I mentioned, 14 years ago. And I found through my tenure doing Sitecore that there was an interesting thing that was happening. People were buying Sitecore and buying it for a lot of the reasons many organizations do, the personalization, the marketing intelligence, and all of those things. And then years into their using Sitecore, they weren't even personalizing. So that's when I realized that it wasn't just about the implementation, but there needed to be more of a focus on the actual strategy aspects of it. And that's why I rebranded myself as a CX architect all of those years ago. And I've been focusing on strategy and kind of how do you make the most of the platform over that period of time. Now, as we've all gone through our journey with Sitecore, we've seen things change a bit. And most recently, we've seen a lot of talk about composability. And with Sitecore's more recent acquisitions, they're branding themselves, or we are branding our community as the new direction being towards composability. But I really want to kind of break down, what does that mean? I hear a lot about it from what it means about it in terms of what it means from a technology perspective. And my colleagues, Cam and Akshay, I believe on the 22nd or the 21st, Kushbu and the people at the India user group will let you know about that. We'll be presenting about it from a architect's and developers perspective a little bit later on. But I want to focus on composability in terms of what it means from a strategist perspective, what it means from a business user's perspective. Why should they care? What is it? Why should they care? And how do we get there? So what is composability? I picked up this lovely Wikipedia definition, which says composability is a system design principle that deals with the interrelationships of components. A highly composable system provides components that can be selected and assembled in various combinations to satisfy specific user requirements. So it's all about the individual components that working together is what composability is about. You compose or build a system from its various parts. Now, that is something obviously that we have been working with. Those of you who have a software background know that well from things like solid principles or just generally good architectural principles. So we talk about composability in software as being built around modules that have a single area of responsibility, that do specific things, modules that are interchangeable with one another. And interchangeable means that a module, for example, that will do aggregation of data in one module that does aggregation of data should be interchangeable with another module that does a similar role. And that interoperability is facilitated by having interfaces that are common by those modules. That allows them to be interconnected, and it yields very flexible systems in that when I want to change the behavior of one of the pieces of the module, I am not upsetting the overall functioning of the system. So that is really what composability means in a software sense. And I want to offer to you today that it actually means the same things when it comes to businesses as well. One of the things that I've found interesting as I've gone through my journey as an entrepreneur and a business leader is how much a business or a team is very much like the computer system. And maybe it's because I'm coming from it from the software background, as well as I gotten from software to entrepreneurship. But a business is very much like a software system. We have departments that are very much like modules when you talk about a software system. We have these packaged business capabilities, or that should be PBCs rather than PCBs. PCBs actually, I think, are a dangerous chemical. So I'll correct that in my slide a little bit later on. But we have packaged business capabilities and roles rather than software modules in businesses. We have people who do various jobs rather than code or routines that do those jobs. And in business, these modules are interoperable because of certain processes and rules that link them together. So when you have sales, you have a certain amount of information you need to send to accounting so that they can do their job. You have to get input from legal, and there are rules that allow these different departments or modules of the business to be interoperable, to cooperate with each other. So I want you to put that into your minds, that interoperability, the modular concept, is something that exists in businesses today. So when we're thinking about businesses as systems, also consider these principles. These are principles that Gartner called out way back in 2019. So it's 2019, Gartner started talking about composability and composable business. And I want to call that out because we've been talking so much about composability as a technology play, when really, when Gartner started talking about it in 2019, it was about composable business rather than software directly. Software is definitely involved in having a composable business because everything we do is digital, but we're talking really about making the business more composable. So what are the principles? Modularity. It allows us to achieve a better agility between the business units. The autonomy, that means that each unit is going to be responsible for its own thing. Orchestration, that is, again, connecting the various units to each other and ensuring that there is an efficient flow of information between them towards that common goal. And discoverability, be able to react faster by sensing change. That is important for the agility of your business. So we're going to need to make sure that one business discovers an issue, they're able to pass that knowledge and to raise those alerts to other areas of the business. Think about it even as, in your own mind, in your own brain. We know that there's various brain regions that are responsible for things like speech and sight and so forth. And these need to be able to rapidly with each other so that we can respond to change. When we're talking about composable business, there are some essential building blocks that we need to observe. Composable thinking. That is being flexible in our thinking. There is not one solve any particular problem. And I want to repeat that again. When we sometimes go into solutioning in business, we start to think about, well, this is the right way. We should do it this way because that's the correct way. When you have a composable mindset, you understand that there are correct ways and many ways to attack any particular problem. So you must put on a composable thinking and a flexible thinking kind of mindset when you're attacking that. Composable business architecture means that you think about the structure and purpose of each of the units deeply. And then we're talking about composable technologies to support the thinking and business architecture on top of those. So those are the essential building blocks that Gartner called out that we need to have when we have composable business thinking. So I mentioned technologies. Where does technology come into play when we're talking about composable business? The technologies are those things that support the business capabilities. So we're not taking a technology first approach. It is a business capability first approach. What do I need to do in my business to be successful? And then what are the technologies that will support that? So it is first the packaged business capabilities first, and then the technologies to support those capabilities afterwards. We want to make sure that the technologies are loosely coupled. That means that they have an API or an interface that allows them to communicate with each other, but they're not so bound to each other that they mean that your business units themselves cannot change in the ways that they do things. And that is really the thing about composable technology that enables a more flexible and composable business, is that the units in your solution, your technical solution, are loosely coupled, and they're not exactly so tightly bound to each other that you cannot change what somebody is doing over here and to have adverse effects on other units. Single areas of responsibility are a key sort of concept when it comes to composable technologies as well. And that really comes down to making sure, and this is actually the big shift. When we were talking about, when we started building DXPs, which was the old Sitecore world with XP, we were building on top of this basic content management or content platform layer. We were adding other areas of responsibility for analytics and email and marketing orchestration and all on top of the one structure. And that kind of violates that single area of responsibility principle that was so important to a more modular, flexible software, or a more modular and flexible business. The ease of implementation is something that is obviously very key when it comes to composable technologies. We should be able to implement quickly and easily, and that enables us to also pivot easily and quickly, because the whole point of having a composable business is to be more agile and flexible. Therefore, the technologies that we use with the composable business have to be able to be pivoted rapidly as well to accommodate the changes on the business side, which of course accommodate changes with the customer. So why composability? Well, according to Gartner, by 2023, and hey, 2023 is in a couple minutes, it's just next year. And we were talking about this in 2019. So we're now 1 year away from the time frame that they were talking about. By 2023, organizations that have adopted an intelligent composable approach will outpace the competition by 80% in the speed of new feature implementation. 80%, that's quite the bold prediction. And we're starting to see some of that come to pass. In a matter of fact, when McKinsey and Corps took a look at businesses during the pandemic, they found that businesses that have quicker response speeds during COVID-19 and adopted technologies quicker were able to have a sustained advantage in the long haul. So this is a critical thing for us to do. Certainly we discovered that during COVID, but I think that is something that's not going to change after COVID. The pace of change in our businesses and the need for businesses to respond rapidly has only gotten more important. So why do we want to be composable as businesses? Because it enables us to respond quicker. And if we don't adapt, much like the dinosaurs, if we don't adapt to the rapidly changing environments, we will go extinct. So it's a matter of survival to stay composable and flexible. So I think that adequately covers why. It's really about being more agile, modular, and flexible in our thinking. But how do we get there? I want to put in front of you that I have this 5 P's sort of alignment rules that I like to put forward when you want to think about how do we get to a more composable, flexible business. And matter of fact, how do you kind of plan any of your digital experiences or almost anything that you do in your business today? I think it's 5 P's that you need to start with: purpose, then attack the problem, look at the people who are involved, the processes, and only then do we look at the platform to support all of that. So the purpose, the why, start with why. Why are you even in business? What is it that you want to achieve? What change do you want to have in the world as a business? And that's important to have alignment around that. What is the problem that your business solves for its consumers? Who are you talking to? If we're talking about digital customer experience, that the people that we're talking to, the problem that we're trying to solve for them is key. And then, of course, if you want to get the job done, we have to turn our eyes towards the people who are involved in our organization and the job that they do, the processes, the how they do their job, and finally, the platform that supports them in their processes and jobs. If we're going to start with purpose, there is no substitute for getting executives in the room, bought in, and all rowing in the same direction. And I've seen this time and time again. Camrose, who's on the call today from Conavos, will also have seen it. We won't call out the customers in this, but we've seen this together where we've seen that there's been a lot of ivory tower leaders who may or may not in their own minds have their ideas in terms of where the business needs to go. But we seldom see them in the meeting rooms when we're planning the digital experience. And I think that's a huge miss because then is that purpose really being communicated all the way down to the people who are making the decisions about your web experience, your digital experience overall? It's important to get those C-suite leaders in the room. And I think for all of the business leaders who might watch this, make sure that when we're talking about our digital programs, and like I said, everything that we do in business today is digital. All of our touch points with our customers are facilitated via digital means. Make sure that your executive is in the room with the technologists, the strategists, all of the people who will be working there. Don't delegate that. Make sure that we are all aligned in terms of purpose and that there's executive buy-in for the transformations that need to happen. I am a big fan of centers of excellence. And a center of excellence is something where we're going to take people from different parts of the business and put them together to achieve a certain business purpose. And in this case, when in our space, it's to have an excellent digital experience program. Get them into the room and kind of put together a cross-functional team of everybody who might have inputs or rely on outputs from that program. That means folks in sales need to be in the room. People who are working on the content and the web experience should be in the room. Obviously, the people from marketing should be in the room, and the folks who lead in the C-suite should also be there. Engage your architects early. I have over time talked about the mistakes that we make oftentimes. Again, over the course of my career, how many times I would run out of fingers if I wanted to count. How many times have we gotten just a requirements document thrown over the fence to the people who are implementing the digital solution to say, hey, go build this. And it's a shame. Sometimes I look at this and you've bought something like Sitecore, and I'm looking at this thing I'm going to build, and there's not even personalization in here. The way that you've described it to be built doesn't really connect with the capabilities of the platform. And that's a huge miss. And that's why we see this phase one, mythical phase two gap happening all too often with our customers, because architects are not brought in early enough into the process so that you can build things that will suit your team and your objectives. If you were building your dream house and you called your interior designer first, or you called folks who were going to do the landscaping first, you would have the cart before the horse. So why are we building these complex digital ecosystems and calling the architects and technologists last to build those things? That's a huge miss. engage them in that center of excellence in those conversations very early on. Remember when we talked about composable thinking, and that meaning that there is one way to do things? Well, that means that we have to agree when we're trying to get there that the ideas that we have are things that need to be tested, that it's not the final word, that the conversation with the customer is going to evolve. And so our decisions need to evolve, and we need mechanisms for understanding when it's time to change. That means we're going to need some KPIs. We need to agree on tests. We have to establish a hypothesis, and then we have to agree on the numbers that will show us whether we're being successful or if we need to pivot. That's an important aspect for you to consider when you get around that table in your center of excellence. And then lastly, to adopt an evolutionary mindset. A web experience is not something that is ever done. It is something that needs to continuously evolve. Why? Because experience is a conversation with a customer. And if you're only doing the talking, if you're only ever sending out the same message year after year after year until it's time for the next big upgrade, well, you're not having a conversation, it's a monologue. And I hope not to have too much of a monologue. In a few minutes, we're going to switch over to have some questions and so forth and conversation about this. But a digital experience is something that has to evolve and adapt over time as well. So you have to adopt an operational mindset that is project-based, where you have, a redesign project, and the evolving of your web experience ideally should be something that is continuous. One of the nice things about the new SaaS-based kind of direction that we're going is that enables us to get over things like, doing upgrades every few years. And the systems behind the scenes will continuously be updated by the vendors who support them. That enables us to get into more operationally minded thinking rather than being, a big lift upgrade, another big lift redesign. Think about having your program evolve over time. How else did we get there? Well, if we talked about purpose being first, and we talked about, purpose and the problem, and also then people. What does that mean for your people? If we're going to have a composable business, that requires that our people also have areas of focus. Remember, there's single areas of responsibility in the software module world. Well, that best of breed thinking also applies to our people. Think about it. If I am somebody who's a marketing technologist or a member of the marketing team, and I have to write content and do UX and deal with the analytics and do the marketing automation, or I'm required to do little bits of all of those things, can I be really excellent at any of those things? There's a catchphrase called, master of all, jack of all trades, master of none. Well, that applies to the people as well as it does to technologies. So in order to really get there, it's important for us to kind of have more specialized roles on our team, people who focus on being excellent at one thing. So what sorts of roles would we need? Something like, CX architects, I might submit. Enterprise solution architects, shout out to Michael and Cam on this call. Content writers, marketing specialists, UX specialists, data scientists. Things like UX are deep specializations on their own and require people who really think deeply about UX. Don't make your content writers and your web people UX people as well. It doesn't make sense in a composable mindset for us to think about them that way. So when we're talking about composable systems and people are lamenting the loss of their WYSIWYG in their content platform, that's because we're kind of tied to the old monolithic thinking. A composable mindset means that we're thinking best of breed in terms of the system's components, but also the jobs that people do. The content writer doesn't need to be able to lay out the page. That is something that somebody who's more specialized in UX should be focused on if we want to be truly excellent in our digital experience. How do we get there? Just purpose, problem, people, processes. How are those people going to interact with each other? So do a good job next when you're in your center of excellence, talking to each other about what your job is, what the inputs and outputs should be, the interfaces, so to speak, between your units, and then test those. What functions are needed by the units? What are the inputs and outputs? Are there any performance bottlenecks? We were dealing with one customer where we learned that it took something like 16 days to get a piece of content through their whole process, from content writing, this is when it was ready written, to when it was published to the website, 16 days. And that was a sure sign of bottlenecks in their process. Eliminate those bottlenecks and eliminate chances for errors in your process, and coordinate those things. That's one of the things you need to focus on. And then, and only then, do you then begin to pick platform tools to support everything else. So that's when we should be thinking about, do we need a CDP? Is Sitecore Personalize a good fit for the people, problems, processes that we have already talked about? What kind of search platform do we need to support our customers? Those things are a secondary concern, something that comes after all of the people, processes, all of those other 4 Ps in that framework. As we begin to wind up, I'm going to say how are you going to get there as well. Think about evolution. Don't make it something where you think you're going to go from your monolithic approach to ripping out everything and going fully composable in one step. I think that would be a huge mistake. Revolutions of that sort don't happen without martyrs, and you don't want to be one of those martyrs, and you don't want your colleagues to be those martyrs as well. So start moving in a stepwise fashion towards that. Make those changes slowly. Start with changes by connecting your people, talking about your purpose and problems and so forth, and how you execute your processes, and finally pick the platform tools that fit that, but do it piece by piece in an evolutionary manner rather than one that is revolutionary. Now let's talk finally about who composability is right for and who it's not right for. Is it right for everybody? No, it's not right for every organization. Why do I say that? Because not every organization has a team large enough to support specialists. Sometimes when you are a smaller team, you need to have a generalist who does the UX and the content and the marketing and all of those things, and that is really just wants to work with one platform. That's why I don't think actually that monoliths are going anywhere. I think that especially small and medium teams will find a monolithic platform to be very appealing, in that, their generalists can work with one platform. So if you can't support the complex processes that are involved, perhaps it's not for you. Perhaps if you just need to be a little bit more nimble, agile, if you're kind of that early stage startup kind of business, I don't think you want to jump directly to a very complex composable approach if you don't have the people and the processes to support that. If you're a siloed organization where you don't have the opportunity to talk frequently with other people who are doing different things, perhaps composable approach where the interfaces between your units is going to be so super important might not be for you. And finally, if you don't want to give people the autonomy, or your groups the autonomy, if you need to be able to control everything very tightly, perhaps it's not a good cultural or ideological fit for your business as well. So what then? Where is it suitable? Where is it going to fit? Well, enterprises, certainly. I think that the composable business approach and the composable technology approach is one that is going to be the way that enterprises will go in the future. It works well. It's scalable, largely very highly scalable. So an enterprise is one that can support specialists. When you have an engaged C-suite, that is really going to be a good get into a composable kind of evolution for your business. When you're willing information rapidly and easily between business units, and when you're willing to give up a little bit of control, when you know that even though I work on the content, but I don't really have a say into how it's presented in the user interface, and you get to be okay, it's going to focus on being excellent at content or at analytics or data science, all of those things. When you are willing to give up that control and to work together and to trust your team, then you're really ready for a composable pivot in that way. So that is it, what I have for in terms of slides and presentations. We are at 8:36, so we have about 25 minutes or so, where I hope that we can have a little bit of a chat in terms of your experience, what you've gotten out of this presentation so far. I really want to hear if anybody is on the call, especially has been in the midst of any of these sort of composable pivots, and or if you're not, what sort of challenges do you think with the customers that you're dealing with would have in making a pivot of that sort. So with that, I'm going to open the floor. I'll pass over to Kushbu to kind of facilitate and let us know if you have any comments or questions about that, and I will stop sharing my screen.
Sure. So I have allowed participants to unmute themselves. So now they can unmute themselves, and if they have any discussion point, they can directly brought it up.
Yes. First of all, and yeah, go ahead, Michael. See if.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask, do you see already a trend of organizations following the composable approach, or do you see it as still like, oh, what's this new and different thing?
I think we're it's interesting. It's a combination, really. In some ways, businesses have been built in a composable, especially when you get to the enterprise scale. A lot of them are modular already, just because you need to have that to build a rather large enterprise. So we are de facto modular in our thinking in many respects. And so perhaps some of this is nothing new, but I think it is actually starting, actually wrapping our heads around thinking of it consciously in that way enables businesses to kind of adopt some of the stuff that we've been doing in the software world to make their businesses even more composable. So large enterprises, especially very agile large enterprises, are already sort of composable, but it's maybe not as conscious as it could be. And I think if it was a little bit more conscious, we'd have even more agility in that respect. When it comes to small, medium enterprise, that is something where I think a lot of people are kind of sitting back with some skepticism about having so much kind of granularity in their business and in their software and so forth. So there's a little bit of resistance. There's a lot of people, when we're talking about the technology changes, a lot of folks are sitting it out. Yeah, so we know we have, if I'm talking to the Sitecore space, there's been a lot of excitement about the future direction of the platform, but customers today, are largely, doing stay in place upgrades. That's what we're coming across a lot in our work. Folks who are like, I upgrade because I have to stay current with my support. I don't see a lot of people wanting to move directly today. I don't see I don't see that shift there, that the ability to overcome that inertia there. And I think it is really because we have not proven or been talking about the business value about composability enough. We've been talking a lot about what it means from a technology standpoint, but what it means in terms of the business. And it is really the business stuff that has to lead. So not enough traction, a little bit on the enterprise in a de facto kind of way, but not conscious. And on the small business side, no, they're staying put. They're just, they just want to kind of, there's just really waiting it out and to see what comes down the pipes. But we need to do a better job of giving people the impetus they need to start making those changes by proving the value of composability for their business.
I would add to that, Dennis, that we also have to help them understand. I think your presentation is one that needs to be heard more, because I don't think people truly understand the composable space, right? They don't understand how to go about doing. And so that's, the fear of the unknown, right? I don't know anything about this. I know we're talking a lot about it, but really, how do I get my organization that direction? And can we, right? You mentioned also about the teams, right? When it's not just composable technology, but your composable team. Your team has to be composable, and I think those two things, I think, are slowing the what do you call that, the onboarding of individuals or companies being more
100%.
composable.
100%. I mean, like, I think that the people aspect is the one that is going to be the the most intractable, because when you think about it, like, and you see it so much in even resumes, right? Or not resumes, but rather job postings out there. A marketing department is hiring. Well, and by the way, when we're doing that for some of our digital positions over at Conabos, because we're a small organization, folks like Ken, who's part of our marketing team, needs to be able to write content and do analytics and. I'm afraid to say that's not necessarily a really great fit sometimes for a very modular sort of a structure in our team, because we just don't have the bodies. We allow Mr. Gray to be able to specialize on just the one thing. And so, yeah, I mean, if you already have an existing team where somebody is doing, content writing and SEO and
UX.
to get to that, yeah, and UX, you got your people who are, hey, I do the web content. What does that mean? Well, like they write the content and they lay out the pages and they do the personalization and
the SEO.
and the SEO. So is that really ideally suited to then shifting towards a composable direction where that 1-2 people need to go to this system for that and this system for that and to another system for something else? It doesn't really, it's not as much of a, so yeah, the people part of it, Ken, you're absolutely right, is probably one of the biggest blockers towards moving in that direction. And that's where it really has to start. An organization has to see the benefit in having people specialize in specific things like that, and then to provide and connect the best of breed tools that support that. And I is ready for that. That is when a composable best of breed approach really is going to sing. But if you find too much overlap, it's going to be a difficult uphill climb.
I have noticed you were speaking about upgrades and kind of the pain and going through that process. And every so often I see on the Sitecourse Slack someone asking questions about Sitecourse 7, maybe 8.
Yeah.
And thinking, there is a problem there, because that organization should have been long gone off of that version. And so, in a monolithic environment, it would be reasonable to still be on that version because it's so painful. And if every project is a rewrite, there's certainly going to be some sense to wanting to move forward with moving to the next version. But with what Sitecore has been demonstrating with XM Cloud, I think that there's a very good reason to move that version, because then you're no longer left, 2 or 3 versions behind. You're really close to, not bleeding edge, but you're really close to it, because you're getting the newer updates at a rate that we couldn't have gotten in the past.
Yeah, 100%, Michael. And those are two slightly different things. So I mean, there is like the kind of on-prem versus SaaS conversation, and then the monolith and composable thing. Now these things they align, right? And monolith, that's the most rigid structure, and and composable SaaS, that's the most flexible, agile structure. But you could also, I suppose you could also have a monolith that's SaaS based, and avoid the upgrade issue. And if, as long as your experience, they're not making any breaking changes to that monolithic platform that was SaaS based, that conceivably could work too and help keep people current, or keep organizations current, even if they, they're kind of adverse to investing in upgrades every once in a while. So yeah, I want to make the slight distinction between the two, but you're absolutely right. And we're right now seeing XM getting ported over to XM Cloud so that it is more SaaS-y in the way that it's effectively a monolith with some bits cut off that have been brought over to a more SaaS-like model. That is the step in the right direction. So it's not, XM Cloud is not a truly kind of pure SaaS or pure composable step, but from an evolutionary standpoint, it is a good intermediary step on the way there. So I think that it is nice to see this kind of evolution. I am looking forward to see what the next step in that evolution is. I saw some nice kind of symphony and page orchestration stuff, where you're pulling things from XM Cloud or other platforms. That is the next step in the evolution. Of course, we still have to see where that lands in the summer to fall of this year. And I'm hopeful that around symposium time that we have our hands on that stuff so that we can talk about it a little bit more concretely than we can today. Do we have any
I
more?
wonder, yeah, I wonder if some of those clients that are on those older versions are kind of, like the people that have older vehicles, right? It gets me from point A to point B. That's all I need. I don't need the latest, GPS on I got my, you know what I mean? Like, I don't need the car that tells me that my tire is going flat, right?
Yeah.
I just need something that's going to get me from A to B. And that's why they're still on 7 and 8,
If it's not, if it ain't broke,
don't fix it, right?
Don't fix it.
Yeah.
Don't fix it if it's not broken. Yeah, I think you're right, Ken. It's all about addressing the purpose and problem, and if the thing that you have today addresses the purpose and I mean, if it actually fits, if it could be that for those customers the thing is a fit. It's just fitting, and the only reason that they want to upgrade is because their team says you better stay current with support, and so they do that. But I really can't fault some of those organizations. Now, I will say that it is a sign that they're not going to be as agile as they might need to be. So it might not be broken for today's environment, but are you sure that you will not be outflanked by somebody who is evolving a lot faster tomorrow? That's the caution that you have to put in front of those organizations. They're absolutely right. It's working for you today, but adopting an agile mindset is not about today, right? It's about tomorrow, and that is, I'm afraid it requires a little bit of faith, to be honest. I mean, I think, and vision, and I think that those are some of the things, and investment, and those are some of the things that are kind of lacking in many leaders who are really watching the budget lines and more than they are watching for the threats in the future. So I can, on one hand, I don't fault them because it ain't broke, but on the other hand, if you needed to pivot and to do something new with your digital experience rapidly, could you? And the signs are, if you're still on 6, and so I've seen customers, like recent customers who are on 6, we're having talks with them about that. But if you're still on 6, I mean, that's a sure sign that maybe you're not as agile and nimble as you need to be.
Yeah. You don't want to be the next Blockbuster, right?
Oh my goodness, no. Yeah, that's a great example. Yeah, our model's not broke. We're not changing it, and next thing you know, out of business. All right, and I think I get the vibe slowing down, so I think we might be running out of questions, but going once, or comments.
I do have a brief question. Yep, full of questions. Could you share a little bit about what your organization is going to focus on next year, 2023? Like where you see a lot of your time invested? 2
years we have been doing composable solutions, composable headless Jamstack solutions, and Camru's on the, sorry, Kushbu, is it the 21st or Cam 21st or 22nd? When is it that
It's
Cam and
21st.
21st? Cam and Akshay will be talking more about what all of that word salad, composable, headless, Jamstack really means from a technology perspective. But so we've been doing that for the last couple of years, and we'll continue to do that with several customers, because I think it's a really nice fit, especially for these, especially for, like I said, enterprise customers who are kind of very much investing in their stuff. We'll continue to do that. For our Sitecore customers, because for Konobo, Sitecore has been our wheelhouse. We're, I guess, getting up to 40 people, but a full quarter. We have 10 Sitecore MVPs. We're deeply invested in Sitecore. So we're going to focus on that, and how do we help our customers start to make the transition?
The first
so it's
step,
really, be about, for the next few years for us with the Sitecore side of our business, is going to be really about the gradual transition towards a composable future. It will be a swapping out of little bits, gradually breaking up the monolith. Perhaps it is, you're on XM today, we're going to move, or XP today, we're going to move you to just XM, in your stay in place upgrade, so that you're ready for XM Cloud, and we swap out just the front end today, and then perhaps a personalized piece, whether it's Sitecore per Uniform or Consia or something else to help you do that bit. So we're going to be focusing on what are the best ways to help our customers make those gradual transitions over, and breaking up that monolith one piece at a time. I think it's going to be a big part of our focus over the next little while. I think as well, though, and it is interesting as Sitecore starts to kind of shift away from XP and all of that stuff, I still do think it's a really good fit for a certain segment of our client base to have that monolith and the monolith as well. So I'm not sure where they will be left in 4 or 5 years time, but we'll see. And but that's what we'll be doing. We'll keep doing greenfield composable solutions. We'll continue transitioning customers gradually from Sitecore's monolithic platform to a composable future, but it'll be something very gradual over the next few years. Most of the hiring we're doing today, I think the hiring has been a good sign of this. We're hiring 20 Jamstack developers and 2 .NET developers. So you can see where the ratio has been going. And so actually for the Sitecore technologists who are out there, if you haven't really started to break into what the Jamstack composable approach, really a headless approach is, get on that. You should probably be spending your time, a lot of your learning time, maybe that 10 to 1 sort of ratio, learning some of the more stuff if you want to be relevant going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, 5 minutes, and I think I will hand over to Kushbu if you want to make any announcements or such before we wrap up. I want to thank the India group for having me, and on the 22nd, Cam and Akshay, from a technologist perspective, from architecture and developer perspective. I encourage you to join that so you can get the other side of what I've been talking about. But Kushbu, thank you so much for having me this morning, or this evening for you, and this morning for me. And I hope to be here again talking about something else.
Sure, it was a pleasure inviting you, and that was very wonderful and insightful presentation, and good discussion among participants. So it was really nice, and thank you all for joining. And as Dennis has already mentioned, our next session is scheduled on 21st June. So join us on 21st June, 9 a.m. IST. The session topic is a solution architect in the composable DXP world, and it will be presented by Akshay and Kamru's partners at Conabos. So they will talk about their experience as to how life now looks like as an architect in the composable DXP world, and how life may change as a developer and how to prepare for it. So stay tuned for it and join us for our next session. Thank you all. Thank you for joining.
All right.
Take care, everybody.
All right. Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Kushbu. Really, I enjoyed.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll see you again.
See you. Yeah.